Hey guys, and welcome back to the vlog. I just finished work and now it's time for another session. WSOP is not so far away and I'm ready for it. Yeah, as you guys know, as you guys can see, I got my custom made hoodie and I got inspired by MD Poker. Shout out to him. I got the link in the description. He created his own hoodie for the WSOP. He's currently grinding it out at the $500 housewarming event. Good luck, my guy. And now we are hopping in our session. €2 blind. I will be in for 300, maybe a little deeper when there are some deep stacks at the table already. And yeah, have fun with this episode. See you at the table. As you guys can see, I buy in for €500 because there are a lot of deep stack player at my table and it takes us about 50 minutes before we pick up our first playable hand, pocket queens. We are in early position and of course I raise it up to 7. The +1 player behind me calls and the cutoff now 3-bets to 30. The button behind him cold calls and it's back on me. I think a 4-bet is in order. I want to size up my 4-bet sizing to 4x. Usually I keep my 4-bets on the smaller side, but since we are out of position and there's a cold call in between, I have to size up. My plan on this was to raise to 115, but unintentionally I missed one green chip and I just raised to 90. It folds to the cutoff who thinks for a little, but then 5-bet jams for 475 effective. He has me covered slightly and it folds back to me. Even though my opponent has some loose tendencies from time to time, a 5-bet in this scenario seems pretty strong to me. I don't think he would do this with jacks or 10s. In my mind he has at least ace king, kings or aces. Pocket queens are unlikely because I'm holding 2 of them, and in the end I'm not willing to put in almost 250 big blinds with pocket queens after a 5-bet and let my hand go and fold. One orbit later my opponent was nice enough to tell us he had pocket kings in this spot and we made a good laydown, if he tells the truth. But I really think so. On to the second hand. Besides the pocket queens hand, we are card dead as fuck for the first 90 minutes. In this one I look down at 3-5 of spades in the cutoff. We see a low jack limp and in my semi-tilt mood I raise to 12. The big blind calls and the low jack comes along and we see a flop 3 raise of queen jack 8 with 2 spades. Not too bad I guess, but this board in general favors the calling ranges of my opponents. They check and on those kind of boards I try to check almost every time, also with this hand, and we see the 9 of clubs on the turn. No improvement for us, but for the big blind that seems to be a good card because he bets 25 now. The low jack behind him calls and I think we get a very good price to draw to our flush and I stick in 25 as well and we see a river. The dealer rolls over the queen of spades, so we get there with our flush, but unfortunately the board is paired now. The big blind now checks, it seems like he's given up on the hand and now it's the low jack's turn and he bets and he sizes up to 100. Gross spot for me, but in the end I think when I call on the turn and get there on the river, even though it's a scary board, I have to call here since there's a possibility my opponent overplays a 10 in this situation. After 30 seconds I side call, the big blind as expected folds right away and my opponent in the low jack shows us pocket 9s. So we boated up on the river and we lose this one unfortunately. After these 2 hands it's already time to rebuy. We are kinda short and I rebuy for 300. We are in for 800 total now. Let's go to the next hand. This is just a quick one to show you guys how my session went this evening. I have pocket 10s in the big blind and we see an early position raise to 12. The middle position player calls and the cutoff now decides to 3-bet to 35. It folds back to me and I'm not really sure what is the best play here. To 4-bet in this spot when there's an early position open and the cutoff 3-bet seems a little too risky to me. Folding seems a little too whack as well, so I cold call the 3-bet. The early position initial raiser calls the 3-bet as well, but now the middle position player who cold called the open raise rips it all in for 100. Reasonable because there's a lot of that money in the pot. It folds back to the cutoff, the initial 3-better who re-raises to 300. Now it's time to fold our pocket 10s and we lose another 35 bucks. At the end in this hand the opponent in middle position wins the hand with pocket aces versus ace jack suited on an ace high board. Things are going pretty well this evening. Let's hope we can turn things around again. What better way to turn things around again? Right, pocket aces. Literally the next shuffle I get pocket aces in the cutoff. We see a limp from the low jack before us and I raise to 10. Unfortunately it folds all the way back to the low jack player who at least calls the 10 euro and we see a flop heads up. It's almost a little too good because the dealer shows us ace 8-3 with 2 hearts. After my opponent checks to me, I decide to c-bet. I want to build a pot right now, even though we crushed this board so hard. Luckily for us, he decides on a call. We see the king of clubs on the turn, so we still have the nuts and he checks to me again. This time I want to size up and I bet 30. My opponent calls again. The dealer burns and shows us the 5 of hearts on the river. So the obvious front or flush draw got there, but my opponent checks to us for a third time. I don't want to be scared for monsters under my bet and I bet for value once again for 65. Unfortunately my opponent doesn't think for too long and mucks his card, but luckily and finally we drag in a pot, even though it's just a small one with pocket aces. Finally, the poker gods listen to my prayers because we pick up another playable hand not even 10 minutes later, this time in the cutoff with ace queen offsuit. There's an under the gun straddle to 5 and the low jack before me calls. I raise this pot up to 20 and both of my opponents decide to call and we go free raise to a flop of jack 6-5 rainbow. They decide to play and flow and check to me, and on this one I decide to c-bet, represent some strong hands like overpairs or ace jack. I can continue betting on many turn cards like any ace, king, 10, queen. At least that went through my mind in this situation. The under the gun player calls, the low jack gets out of the way and we see another 6 on the turn. He checks to me and since this is a very bad card for me, I decide to check back and we see a free river card in form of an offsuit deuce. Now he decides to lead into us for 50 and we are only sitting here with ace high and yeah, nothing I can do and I fold my hand and my opponent is again nice enough to show us a jack. Nothing too exciting I know, but that's kinda how the session went this evening. Another great example for that is the next hand. We are on the button with ace jack and I put on the 4 euro straddle. The middle position raises to 16 and the low jack and the hijack call. I'm last to act and I could just call here with my strong hand, but I see all the dead money in the pot and I think my hand is strong enough to 3-bet. So I go for it and I 3-bet to 75. The middle position wastes no time and shoves all in for 285 and it folds back to me and we have to fold once again. And yeah, what can I say? Feels pretty bad so far. Seems like I can't choose the right moves in this session, but it's still kinda early and a lot of time to turn things around. Only 5 minutes later again we pick up another playable hand, pocket 9s in the hijack. There are 2 limps before me and I raise to 14. Only the +1 limper decides to call and we go heads up to a flop of 10-10-4 with 2 spades. He checks to me and I think most of the time I should be way ahead here, sometimes way behind, but I c-bet for 50. The +1 player seems not to like this bet because he raises up to 50. Sometimes he could have a 10, sometimes he just wants to represent one, sometimes he could have a flush draw, so I think I can't fold to his raise right away and I stick in the 35 euro more. We see the ace of clubs on the turn and my opponent now checks to me. Seems like a scare card for both of us. For a few seconds I was ready to bet and represent a strong hand here, but ultimately decide on a check, see a river card and re-evaluate. Unfortunately the dealer burns and shows us the king of spades, so the obvious front or flush draw got there. So now I don't think there are many hands that I beat that my opponent check raised the flop with. He still could have a 10, he could have some flush draws that got there, he could have a slow played monster as well and I don't see many bluffs. Even worse, my opponent decides to bet and he overbets to 200. Pretty polarized and as said, I don't see many bluffs that he can have here and I reluctantly fold again. Unfortunately my opponent didn't show his card, so we will never know, but before that I'm kinda short again and rebuy again for 200 euro, so I'm in for 1000 euro total now. In the next one, we look down at ace king in the cutoff. I think there's a straddle in this hand because my opponent in the low jack raises to 20. It folds to me and of course I put in a 3-bet to 60. It folds back to the low jack, he decides to call and we see a flop of jack 7-5 rainbow. Side note, my opponent is a really loose player who likes to gamble and it seems like he doesn't care a lot about money. Anyway, he checks to me on this board and I check back. We see an offsuit 6 on the turn and he checks to me again. I think there's no reason to bet, so I check back once again and we see another 7 on the river river. My opponent now leads for 100. I already saw him bluffing so many times and I really want to do a hero call since my session went horribly wrong all the evening, and after like 1 minute I decide to stick in 100, and of course my opponent shows us King Jack offsuit. And even worse, the table breaks like 10 minutes later and we have to book another big loss for this vlog. Let's go into the session update. Yeah guys, another day, another session and another big losing session. Even my run good hoodie couldn't change the result of this session. We are in the game for 1000 and out of the game for 325. That makes a loss of 675. Unfortunate, but I keep up the run good momentum for the Vegas trip. I will ship some tournaments there and cash out some big cash games, and you know what I mean. As always, much appreciated that you watched my video. If you like this content, please leave a like and subscribe under the channel. Leave a comment down below and I probably respond, and I wish you a good night, good day, good morning, whatever. See you on the next one. Goodbye.